After a progressive ninth place finish for Swansea City last season, they're hoping to push on into the playoff places. The bad news, of course, is that they've lost their manager, Russ Martin, who's been headhunted by Southampton. But the good news is that they've arguably got themselves an upgrade because Michael Duff has been poached from Barnsley. He's arguably got a better record in management on paper than Russ Martin. And the aim is that Michael Duff can keep the stylistic aesthetic appeal of Swansea City and keep the Swansea way, whilst making them a little bit more ruthless at key moments, which is certainly an area they're going to need to improve on. So can Swansea be dark horses for promotion next season, or will it be another mid-table finish? Well, to discuss all this and more, I'm delighted to be joined by Ben Church and Luke from SwansCast. Good evening to you, gents. Thanks so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. You excited for the season ahead, Ben?
Yeah, very, to be fair. I think when Russell Martin left, there was a sense of, fear, as it always is when a Swans manager gets poached by a bigger club. But, to be fair to the club, Duff's come in fairly quickly. I say fairly quickly, it's a bit drawn out actually with Russell Martin to Southampton. We know the whole legal issue there.
Sure.
But no, everyone who seems to know about Michael Duff likes him. Many people saying he's an upgrade without actually having the chance to watch him at Barnsley and Cheltenham myself. I'm excited.
Same for you, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, as Ben's just touched on then, it was quite a drawn-out sort of saga with Russell Martin leaving, so didn't really know what to think of what was going on at the time. But I guess even though nothing could necessarily be announced for a long time, the club seemed to be looking in the background for who's going to be next, even before the announcement, if you like, of Martin actually joining Southampton. And it was nice to see it happen so quick this time, because when Cooper left last time, it really wasn't good, and we ended up having Russell Martin like with a week till the season kicked off, and that really derailed us. So it's nice to at least have some sort of like stability for the summer, even though it's a change of manager going into the new season, which means we can all kind of get excited ahead of time rather than worried because we're kicking off in a week and have no idea what the manager's going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we delve any deeper, by the way, just a quick note to say I'm covering all 72 clubs across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July on these EFL Debate summer deep dives. We're also available, of course, on YouTube and on Spotify. So if you're watching or listening to this on either of those platforms, do give us a subscribe because that helps us out a lot. And check out the other videos and episodes once you're done with this one. Ben, you've also appointed Paul Watson, who's famed for the work that he did at Luton Town, and we all know about the rise that they've gone on through the leagues. Does that give you a lot of excitement that even if Michael Duff were to move on next summer in the same way that Russ Martin has, you've got some sort of continuity and a figure that's kind of watching the club from upstairs and monitoring things and, keeping that continuity?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's good now. We got a sense of footballing knowledge in the building. The only issue is, would that footballing knowledge leave with Paul Watson if he got poached? So I'm hoping there's an actual structure behind him as well. But no, I think the role he had at Luton, he said, slightly different to what he has here. But it's not just going to be transfers; it's going to be work within the academy as well. And we've actually made a few signings, none of which we'd know personally, but in the academy, hopefully to align with the first team and progress through the ranks as well. So I think we're hopefully now taking a long-term approach. We had a sense of, had the wind knocked out of us in January, but there was no real plan in place. Hopefully now Paul Watson comes in, there will be one.
Yeah, absolutely. Luke, obviously the appointment of Michael Duff is likely to mean a change from the 3-4-2-1, which Russ Martin favoured, broadly speaking, to a 3-5-2, which Duff has played throughout his career. How close do you think this Swansea is to be able to deploy that formation?
I don't think it'd be too that far off, really. I think one of the things that we perhaps called for as fans a little bit was somebody to play behind the strikers in a bit of a hole. Well, I know when Russell Martin started playing the three at the back and he was playing Perot up front, maybe with two people but they seemed a little bit wider. There always seemed to be a gap in behind the striker and the other two forward players who would go wider, even when Perot went out wide. And it just seemed like there was something missing there. So I'm quite excited to see how we're going to introduce that role of an attacking midfielder, because it's something that we haven't really used for a long time. Even Steve Cooper, we had Selena here at the time, and he fell out of favour and ended up leaving the club. And fans perhaps at the time were a bit curious of that decision as well, but it just hasn't been a position we've used. So maybe not on the face of it right now we've got someone that we can say will hold their hand up and put the name to start there every week. The one that I would say comes to mind maybe is Ollie Cooper. It could really suit his style. Maybe it could be a season that he really makes a name for himself. Last year being his breakthrough season, if you like. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and I'm sure there'll be some more work done in the transfer window to kind of address these areas that perhaps won't suit his style in terms of the players we've got here already, that perhaps he needs to bring people in to help him along the way.
Yeah, Ben, Luke mentioned Ollie Cooper there. He's a creative midfielder that I've been a big fan of for a while, even going back to his loan at Newport County. He seems like such an agile operator and very difficult to pin down because he's so elusive. Do you see him playing a big role in Swansea City's fortunes next season?
Yeah, I hope so. I love Ollie Cooper. He fell out with the team a bit towards the end last season. I was slightly annoyed, to be honest, because I didn't really see any real reason. He's very tenacious, so closes the opposition down well off the ball, brilliant driving. I think sometimes he may hold on to the ball a bit too long, but that's something which you can iron out in his game as time progresses. And like Luke's just alluded to, we haven't really had that central cam position in our formation for quite a while. We've had wide attacking mids with Russell Martin for long periods. So obviously you had Cooper playing, and there's quite a long list to be fair. Liam Walsh, Jamie Patterson, Olivia and Cham all play their part, but not in that central position. Again, I think Ollie Cooper could potentially be that player, but it may just take a bit of adapting to get used to. That's all.
Yeah, well, let me talk you through because I suppose neither of you would have watched Michael Duff's Barnsley team in too much detail, so perhaps I can be of a little bit of help in terms of the way his sides like to operate, because a big part of it is relationships and combinations. So he likes to have in his 3-5-2 the right centre back, the right-sided central midfield, and the right wing back, and the same on the left flank, if you like, them to all interchange and rotate between themselves, and that's quite a big part of the way his sides play. And you could often see in his Barnsley side there'll be a series of duos and trios and combinations, whether it's out wide or whether it's in the units in defence, midfield and attack. They all seem to know each other's game and roles and responsibilities inside out. Luke, are there any areas of the Swansea team where you feel like there's already an understanding in place that Michael Duff won't have to do an awful lot of work to sort of cultivate?
I think maybe not so much in terms of players rotating during a match, but there are several players who have been used in several positions in the last couple of managers' time at the club. There's always been a phrase using square pegs in round holes. It's been something the managers have had to do for the last couple of seasons here. So we had the likes of Joe Latabodia. I know he's not going to be with us next season, but he was playing right back last season, but he was never right back previously before Martin thought he could do a job there, and he did quite well. I've seen Jay Fulton play in defence. Mac Rimes has done stints at left back. There's been a few Ollie Cooper's done stints at right wing back. So I don't think it'd be too difficult for the players to necessarily adjust to that sort of way of thinking and playing. It's not stuff they haven't been asked to do before when fitting in the team in the areas that we've been perhaps a little bit short. And the wing back areas are areas we have been short in for quite some time now. So I think there's quite a few players that are capable of slotting in there. So I don't think it would necessarily be an issue to try and get that as part of the tactics.
I mean, Ben, is that Luke mentioned the wing back positions there? Is those the main areas we're looking at in terms of the areas you're going to need to recruit in order to be able to play that 3-5-2?
Yeah, 100%. I think, to be honest, there was a time where we had good wing backs at Swansea City under Russell Martin. You had Cyrus Christie. Not Cyrus Christie. I've forgotten his first name. But Christie.
No, I think I was right, didn't it?
It is. I always get confused as other Christies about, but yeah, Cyrus Christie and Hannah's Wolf on the flanks, and I think there was a run especially where, I'm going to bring it up, we beat Cardiff 4-0 at Legoland. The wing backs were superb that day, but then last season, as Luke alluded to, we had Joel Latabordier playing there, and it didn't suit him. So he did a job, to be fair to him, but he was good in possession, but he isn't the sort of player who's going to take on his man, whip in a good delivery towards the back stick or anything. Manning was superb at left wing back, but he's gone on a free now. No doubt he'll be moving up in the world as well. So wing back definitely is a position we need to strengthen. Josh Key's already been brought in from Exeter.
Of course.
Everything seems to suggest that's a solid addition, low risk, high rewards. Left wing back, all we've got is Nathaniel Ogbetter at the minute. Never really got going at Swansea, did decent on loan at Peterborough last year, but he's out injured till September now. I think we're going to definitely need a starter at the left wing back to come in, and probably a backup at right wing back, just because we're short. We always have been short in those positions. So if we've got a bit of funding now, try and use it to strengthen them.
Yeah, I think with the Josh Key signing, Luke, I think it's an exciting one from many perspectives, because this is someone who's young and talented, very technical and energetic wing-back who's can not only hold the width but also break into the penalty area at times and got very good close control as well. At the same time, I would maybe say that while he's earned a crack at the Championship, if we're holding Swansea to top 6 standards, I'm not necessarily sure that he'd be ready to find the consistency sort of required for that. So I suppose, how are you feeling about that signing? Are you happy to bring in someone who's a bit of a project and someone to develop, and someone who could be one of the best wing backs in the league in a 2 or 3 years' time, rather than someone who's necessarily ready to go and find that consistency in the here and now?
I think, as Ben's already touched on there, we definitely already need more wing backs. So having Josh Key brought in is a really good positive. And if he's an exciting talent, that maybe raw talent this year can do a job now, be a bit exciting, but it's a little bit raw and hasn't got the experience. Yeah, it would be good to get somebody in that is a little bit more of a safe pair of hands, if you like, if we are in that sort of fight this season, which I don't want to say we will or will not be yet, because it's early days with the new manager and the sign-ins. But having said that, we also have a recent history of developing somebody in that role that's gone on to be quite successful in the same sort of mold and category. If you want, Connor Roberts, who, when he did break into the Swansea team, you would argue was raw talent, wasn't really ready to be a regular starter. And he did get a few games in the Premier League before he really became a regular starter for us. Kind of forced, if you will, like, by our relegation. So we were forced into using a lot more youth. And ultimately, sometimes when you give a player who is maybe not ready, maybe nearly ready, the sort of trust and backing that they need to show that they can be that player, it comes a lot quicker. So maybe if it is him that's got to start and be the regular starter in that role, maybe he'll be a little bit rough for the first half of the season, but I'm sure if we can sort of get through that stage, he'll be the better for it in the long term, and we'll benefit from that as well. We had Ethan Laird as well, didn't we? So I guess that's quite a similar example too, where maybe he wasn't necessarily ready, but you could see that he had the talent, and I think it's just encouraging these young players, isn't it? Like, if you want them to succeed and be that level for you, then you need to also go through the mistakes with them.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully Josh Key can really develop, because I think he's a super exciting signing. Ben, let's talk about Matt Grimes now, because this is someone that I have. I almost think the saga over Matt Grimes and whether he's going to leave or not is quite an unhealthy thing for Swansea, because ideally you want it resolved one way or the other, in terms of, yes, he's definitely staying at Swansea, or no, he's definitely going. You've got 10 million, and here, here's the money to reinvest, sort of thing. Yeah. So how are you feeling about that, and what do you think the likelihood is of Matt Grimes' destination?
I think the speculation never really ends with Matt Grimes, does it? I feel like every window, every season, is always him being linked away. I think the good thing this year is obviously 2 years left in his deal. We're in no position where we need to sell him. I think all signs point that Joel Perreault is going to be leaving the club at some point this window, and you'd expect an 8-figure fee there. So I'd be very shocked if Matt Grimes did leave, unless, again, it was, you said 10 million. Probably sounds about right for him, if I'm honest. If we needed to sell someone and Perreault hadn't gone, I'd be a bit worried, because we had a £13 million deficit roughly last year on the accounts, had a 10 million cash injection from new investment this year. So obviously we're still a bit short at this moment in time, if the wage bill has presumably stayed similar. But, there's a lot of clubs interested in Perreault. The only one that keeps getting linked with Southampton's Matt Grimes, and that hasn't actually been from a credible source. It's more been from just fan links. It's a move that makes sense, Southampton, I suppose. But I'd be surprised, if I'm honest. I see him being here this season.
Yeah, the thing I would say though, and I hope Barnsley fans aren't watching this, but if you lost Matt Grimes for 10 million odd, I would say go and get Luke O'Connell off Barnsley for a couple of million, because I rate him incredibly highly. I think he was one of the best midfielders in League One last season. I'd be super confident in Luke O'Connell stepping up to the Championship if he got that move. I think he's so talented. I think he could captain Ireland to the World Cup one day. That's how good I think he is. So that would be my option to you if Matt Grimes were to go, because I think he's a very similar type of player. In terms of the youth academy then, Luke, which Ben alluded to there, anyone else coming through on the conveyor belt that you're excited about?
Well, Cameron Congreve's been the one that's been kind of knocking around the bench. He's had a couple of games where then he started some games actually last season, 1 or 2. Found it tough at times, but he is still quite young as well. I think he was 18 starting the game last year, maybe 19 now. So he's one that is definitely trying to break his way in. Maybe a player that would benefit from going out on loan, though, to get a full season in the lower league rather than bits and bobs in a championship where some of the games are a little bit tough and he's not used to doing that week in, week out. Not saying he's not capable, but when it's like every month or every 2 months, you're coming off the bench sometimes, and that's your first experience of proper competitive football, I think it can be hard to sort of spread your wings, if you like. And I think there's one, is it Josh Thomas from the youth team as well, coming through up top? He's maybe another exciting player. I think he scored actually in the friendly we had a couple of days ago. So whether we see more of him or not, I'm not sure. It's always difficult, especially when a new manager comes in. It's a new, fresh pair of eyes to look at the youth team. And quite often you find that there'll be one that pops up that you weren't expecting. And I'll go back to Ben Davies under Michael Laudrup. I don't think anyone was expecting him to pop up and oust Neil Taylor for the left-back role last season. But he did. So it'll be interesting. I always get excited of seeing what youth talent the new manager spots, because sometimes I think a manager can make their decisions and that's it. And some of the youth players might think, or not necessarily think, they just don't really break through. So it'll be interesting to see anyway, come the start of the season, who is playing in the friendlies and having a bit of game time.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, you can have a great one-off season through bringing in 4 or 5 loans and players that are just brilliant and really hit the jackpot. But I think if you want sustainable growth, sometimes you've got to invest in assets, both time and money in assets that might not necessarily be all that in the here and now, but can grow over 2 or 3 seasons, and then you've got a saleable asset. Do you think that's the kind of model that Swansea can move towards, and maybe keep the loans to a minimum of 1 or 2?
Yeah, I think it's a model we've already moved towards in the last few years, to be honest. I think when Russell Martin first came in, the 3, say, big purchases we made, in quotes, was Perot for about 1 million, Downs for about 1.5 million, and 1.5 million on Obafemi. Obafemi's already gone for 3.5, Downs has already gone for 10, Perot will probably be going for north of 10 this summer. So even more recently, Nathan Wood for 500k from Borough. He's already been linked with Spurs, obviously soft links, but you'd expect a high 7-figure fee for him now.
Seeing Brentford for 4 million just now. Just now?
So,
yeah.
Well, like bid or...
No, I don't think it's bid, but apparently they are seriously considering.
If Brentford want him, then he's going somewhere, isn't he? Sure. But I guess that's the point I'm making. When we do invest small sums of money in these players, quite often they do give us a return, and that's because of our style of play, which not many clubs do look towards in the Championship, but it's a style that's necessary to develop a player so they can take that step up. So that's something I probably do continue to see us do, and Josh Key, I hope, will be an excellent example of that. He'll probably be a few 100,000, hopefully in a few years to come, one of the better wing backs in the division.
Yeah, I absolutely can see Josh Key continuing on that trajectory. I want to talk to you about the goalkeeping situation, Luke, because you've got Andy Fisher, who was brought in by Russ Martin for his quality of distribution, but there's probably question marks over his capability in terms of shot stopping. And then you've also got Stephen Bender in the equation as well. Do you expect to recruit another goalkeeper, or how are you feeling in that area?
If we keep those 2, I don't expect to recruit one, but it also wouldn't surprise me if we do get one, even if that's maybe a younger goalkeeper to come through the youth team, although there are a couple there already that might be knocking on the door potentially, or at least trying to show that they're capable. In regards to Fisher, I don't necessarily think he's as bad as a player as he has looked sometimes, and maybe the fan perception of him as a goalkeeper is quite low at the moment, or has been at times. For me, I think he's 100% a confidence-based player. And it's quite difficult to be such a confidence-based player when you're in that role, I think, because if you're confident and it's fine, you're saving everything, you're doing well. And he had a really good phase, actually, that when we had a good run at the end of the season, he did pick his game up and he did get better. And that's what I mean by confidence. We had a good run and he started playing better then as a result. And he did look more assured and he looked like he would do things that he wasn't doing a couple of games ago. That doesn't mean he didn't still make some mistakes, because he did, but it was a lot less and he looked a lot more assured and sort of capable, if you like. But then when the going is tough and we were on a really bad run, it also goes extremely the other way. And that's when I say the confidence down. I don't think a goalkeeping position is where you want that sort of personality in a player, because some of the mistakes were...
You want someone more on an even keel where you kind of know what you can get from them. Yeah,
exactly. So it's difficult. And so I wouldn't be surprised, but like, we've got a new goalkeeper coach. I say new, he's returned to the club. So maybe he can work with him and kind of help him out with some of those areas that he wasn't dealing with so well. Because I think when the fan pressure comes, he really doesn't deal with that well as well. And that was quite noticeable. I think Bender will stay as number one. But it'll be interesting to see what impact the new goalkeeper coach in regime can have, because I mean the style of play will be maybe similar but different in a way. From what I understand, the manager's going to try and shore up the defence. That would be one of the key areas that he's going to look at. So I'd imagine the goalkeeping side of that as well is something that's going to be addressed with no mistakes. Maybe we were playing up from the back a bit silly sometimes last season, or under Russ Martin in general. I'd imagine that won't be there anymore. So maybe, Fisher will come in his own when he doesn't have that pressure of the tiki-taka around the box, which maybe he just couldn't deal with it. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah, possibly. Do you know what? I don't know what you think about this, Ben. I felt like some of the goals Swansea conceded last season might have been down to style, but I also think there's some goals that Swansea conceded that actually had nothing to do with style and everything to do with bravery when defending the box or doing simple things well and getting the basics right. And it felt like that was a difficulty for Swansea at certain moments last season. And that's where I would get quite a lot of excitement for Swansea, because I think that if Michael Duff can smoothen some of those rough edges, then obviously there's some potential.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm honest, a lot of that links back into Andy Fisher. I never like picking out a player in particular, but the goalkeeping coach that Luke's just mentioned, Martin Margaretson, coming back into the club, he was here under Steve Cooper. So he came into the club off the back of Graham Potter leaving. We were the absolute worst team in the division at defending set pieces, and he took us from somewhere near the bottom. I think we were like 10th, I'm going to guess, roughly. It was a vast improvement.
Yeah, I think it's scored quite a few goals as well, the other end.
Yeah, but it was pretty much overnight. I think the issue I'm having, though, when I'm trying to picture how this is going to play out this time, Andy Fisher's 5'11", so he isn't good at commanding his area. Stephen Bender's very good at commanding his area, but he's out until about Christmas, so that's not helping us in the short term. He had I think it was an ACL. So Fisher's 5'11". The style of play is going to shift a little bit, so it's not going to be as heavy on playing out from the back and having two people starting in the box. What we were trying to do, and it never really got going, to be honest. So I feel like once you take that part of the game away, it's not really any reason to be playing Andy Fisher anymore. So I'd probably do see a sign of the keeper. If it was me, I really like Stephen Bender, so I wouldn't want to block his pathway to the first team when he comes back. So I wouldn't go out spending 2 million on a keeper to compete.
We're looking at 6 months loan though, Ben. Someone who can sort of give you a stopgap until Bender's back.
Yeah, maybe a 6-month loan, maybe a similar signing to one we made with Ben Hamer, like an 18-month deal on or 1 year deal, it would be in this case on a free potentially. I just don't want to see Bender's pathway blocked back, because I do think he has the potential to be a really strong keeper at this level, but he's had a bit of bad luck. He's always had someone to compete with, always had injuries. I think when he went to Swindon, he did very well there. I was expecting him to kick on, and he hasn't really had that proper run for a full year where he can. But yeah, like you alluded to, I'd probably do see us cutting out some of the silly goals this year. There was quite a lot where we didn't win the first ball, didn't win the second ball, and just drops to someone. It was happening too often. It's one of those goals where you'd say, oh, that's unlucky. But it's not. If it happens twice as often as the opposition, it's not unlucky anymore. It's something we need to improve on. Margaretson probably will bring that, I hope, anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe Perot then, Luke, how big a loss do you think he would be? I would be inclined to think that if you get 10 million for Joel Perreault, actually you've got a reasonable chance of replacing him with maybe half of that money.
It's a bit of a weird one, right? Because it's 40 goals in the last 2 years, or just over 40 goals in the last 2 years, and that on paper is very hard to replace. But I think the first season was a lot better than the last season for him. At times last season, he didn't look like on top of his game, but then he still had a 20-goal season. So what's that say if he does look on top of his game? I guess maybe is more of a highlight, and doing it back to back, that's why people are after him. But like I said, the fee in the Championship, I guess over 10 million, if that's what we end up getting for him, you should be able to get goals, I guess, if you're going to spend that sort of money well. It's just, you just never like to see a striker that's scoring that many goals leaves you. It's always bittersweet. I mean, it's going to happen though. Anyone, I guess, a striker that does that many goals in this league and doesn't go up, you're never going to keep them for that long, are you? Just look at Gyökeres for Coventry as well. He didn't look that good when he had a loan spell at Swansea, but now they're getting, 20 million for him?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's players out there, and again, he is an example that you can go and maybe look at the youth teams for the teams in the Premier League who hasn't had their chance to shine, but maybe could do something for you. So 10 million should be enough to get someone or one or two players in to replace those goals. If we can still create the same sort of chances, then I'm hoping it'll be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also say, Ben, that you might lose one player in Joel Perreault, but you could also use some of that money to get two strikers, because Michael Duff's going to play two up top. He's been very set on 3-5-2 throughout his career. What Swansea have got at the moment is a couple of inside forwards like your Jamie Pattersons and your Olivier and Chams, and I'm not sure they're necessarily going to suit the 3-5-2 in the same way as an out-and-out striker. So actually cashing in on someone like Joel Perreault might actually free up some funds to increase the quantity of numbers.
As long as the money's reinvested, yeah, I definitely agree. But also, the counterpoint is I don't think we really have a choice whether to sell Joel Perreault or not this summer. A club like us can't let a player of that quality go on a free. He's got 1 year left, and he's clearly indicated he's not interested in signing a new deal. So it's definitely just going to be drive up as much interest as possible, and wherever the highest bidder is, we'll take him. I think, like you said, two strikers, I definitely agree with that. We got Liam Cullen, who, he's a real trier. I think he had a good spell under Martin last season, but I partially think his goal scoring record maybe because of the quantity of chances that we were churning out. I'm not sure we'll really suit the more physical style Duff will impose on the team, where the strikers may be required to hold the ball up a bit more. Definitely need one striker now when Perreault leaves too, and this isn't just two strikers who can come in and do a job when required. They've got to be players ready to start. So I think 10 mil is probably a bit lower than what I'd be looking for, simply because of what Gyökeres and Coventry have done with the deal for Sporting Lisbon now. He's going there for 20 million, 1 year in his deal. Gyökeres is a better player, but if he's going for 20, I wouldn't really be happy with Perreault going for 10, just, in the same window.
I don't know. I think that, because if I'm not mistaken, let me just double check. Yeah, I suppose Joel Perreault's 23. How old is Victor Gyökeres? Not 100% sure about this. Oh, yeah, he's 25. That's interesting. Yeah, I think another couple of strikers. I mean, I suppose this brings me on to a point, Luke, which is what's going to happen with Kyle Joseph, because he's a very hard-working centre forward. He's got a good spring on him as well. If Swansea are going to need 4 strikers in their squad, say, rather than 2, is it possible that a gap's going to open up for Kyle Joseph to show what he can do?
I mean, yeah, there's definitely possibility there that it could do. We've also got Morgan Whittaker as well, so it's not. We have got a couple of names that could perhaps have a new chance to show what they can do here. And didn't Kyle Joseph work? He worked for Duff at Plymouth,
Cheltenham Town.
He went to Plymouth last time, didn't he? Yeah, Cheltenham. So maybe I don't know what he saw there when they were together. I knew he scored a couple of goals, but maybe he will know him more than the other players, I guess. So it's definitely an opportunity for Kyle Joseph to stake a claim in the team. We've already touched on Liam Cullen. I do agree in terms of like the physical stuff you were saying, but if he's playing in a 2, maybe they can play off each other. And Cullen's a bit of a poacher, I think. So a lot of his goals last year came when Perreault had hit the crossbar or something, for example, and Cullen just seemed to be in the right place. So if you can pair him with someone that can lead the line more like a Perot if you replace Perot, he could have a little bit of a say. And we have also signed Josh Ginley, which he can also play as striker, I believe, although I think he's picked up an injury, so I'm not sure how long he's going to be out for. So I feel like they definitely will replace Perot. They're going to get someone that needs to score the primary amount of goals, I guess. But all of these other players, including Carl Joseph, can have an impact and show what they can do. And you're speaking about the rotation options earlier that you asked me about players slotting in during the tactics. Well, Kyle Joseph actually played a stint at right wing back as well for Russell Martin in a cup game. So maybe there's another role in the team for him. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how he does get used. Yeah.
Okay, a little bit skeptical of that. We'll have to wait and see. In terms of the defence, then Ben, I want to talk to you about some of the options like Ben Cabango and Harry Darling, because it feels like you've got players with different skill sets. So Ben Cabango's really physical and great in the air and good at the basics, not great on the ball. Harry Darling's almost the complete opposite, where he's absolutely brilliant on the ball and looks like a championship Vermaelen at times, but also has his defensive limitations. And I just wonder, is that a bit of a concern for you, that you've got defenders who are sort of almost too far on the other extremes, and you've not got that defender that can do the basics well, but is also good on the ball?
Yeah, I think their qualities, the three of them, and by the three of them I mean Darling, Wood and Cabango, they all sort of balance each other out fairly well. I think what we got to remember, especially because of their age as well, if any of them were a complete package, they wouldn't be playing in the Championship, they'd be in the league above. I think the issue for me with the three centre-backs, if we're playing a three-back formation, we've never really had that centre-back who's comfortable on the left centre-back position, comfortable on his left foot. Darling did it to an extent, but he sometimes gets a bit too relaxed on the ball. There's been a couple of times where he's had it nicked off of him. If we are going to bring in a centre-back, I'm hoping it'll be a left-footer, but I think every club in England wants a left-footed centre-back at the minute.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
in England and Wales.
And Wales, of course. But no, obviously Joe Latibordier's left. Kyle Norton, he can play in the back three, but I think he's there more for continuity and unity than anything now. One player who's sort of been forgotten about probably is Brandon Cooper. He's not somebody that I'd expect to be starting week in, week out, but ever since we recalled him from his loan spell, I think it was at Newport, he's had a couple injuries. He's never really had that run in the team to prove himself. I'm hoping Duff sees something in him and gives him a chance this season.
Well, the good thing with Brandon Cooper is that Duff has been managing in the leagues where he's been playing recently, so at Forest Green Rovers and at Newport County. So that could work out quite nicely. So Duff knows what his capabilities are, and yeah, maybe he could come into the side. Obviously, with the way Michael Duff plays, he doesn't play with so much like a one number 10, although he did do that a little bit at Cheltenham, but at Barnsley it was more one sitter. Luke Connell, who I've mentioned, they had Adam Phillips as a kind of right-sided 8 and Herbie Kane as a left-sided 8. So I'm just thinking about the 2 number 8 roles. You've obviously got Joe Allen, who's maybe not quite at his best right now, I think it's fair to say. But I'm looking through the midfield at the moment. You've got Ollie Cooper and Cam Congreve, but it still looks a tiny bit light to me, bearing in mind I'm not sure quite how highly I rate Jerry Fulton. So do you see that, Luke, as an area that you're going to have to recruit for?
I think it's interesting to hear you say you don't rate Jay Fulton that high. I think he's done a solid job for us, to be honest. I'm quite happy with him sitting in the midfield in one of those 2 positions. But we've also got Liam Walsh as well, who the second half of last season really decided finally to show that he was worth signing, as unfortunately he's had a lot of injury concerns. So let's hope that he can stay fit, because he definitely had something to offer when he started getting into the team a little bit. And then Cham as well can play there, although I'd rather he didn't personally. I think he's a little bit more, needs to be more forward to see the best out of him. Maybe we could, a lot depends on Grimes as well. There's going to be more emphasis in this midfield, I guess, in the way that Duff is going to play. So one midfielder could definitely be on the cards to come in, but obviously see what happens with Grimes, because that maybe changes the dynamic a little bit. And again, I guess if he does go, there's a big fee, so gives you more opportunity to get players in that kind of suit the style. I would rather he didn't leave. But yeah, maybe one. I'm not sure that. I think there's other areas in the squad that are more of a primary concern. Like you mentioned on the centre backs just now as well, the wing back area, and if Perot leaves, I think are the two key points. And I didn't realise as well that Bender was out till Christmas. I thought he was back, so I'm going to revise what I said earlier and say maybe we do need to get a goalkeeper in at least for 6 months. So I think those areas are definitely more key than centre midfield, because I think there's players here that can slot in there and do a good job. I mean, Carl Norton, you've said as well, he can technically play in midfield too. So
not quite sure about that myself. I'm not sure he'd quite have the legs for it. That would be my concern with that one. But I can hope, he can do a job if it really comes to it. Ben, let's talk about Jay Fulton then. Am I underestimating him a little bit?
I think he's one who's had a lot of stick over the years because he came down from that Premier League squad. It's only him and Norton, unless I'm mistaken, that's really left from that relegation
and Grimes as well.
Yeah. Okay. And Grimes. But no, he was solid last year. It's the truth of it. I think when Russell Martin came in 2 years ago, I was convinced he was going to be shipped straight out, just simply because, everyone looked at him, okay, he's not going to be good enough on the ball in that heavy possession dominant system. But over time, he adapted and he sort of gave us that bite in midfield that perhaps we were lacking when Joe Allen was injured for long periods. So if you're talking about that trio where we have 1 6 and 2 8s, I think if he had somebody who was more attack-minded like Ollie Cooper next to him or Encham, I think, I could see that working personally. If you had Matt Grimes behind, I think a lot of that falls down as soon as Matt Grimes leaves. Mind that isn't anything against Jay Fulton. I do think he's one player which a lot of people on social media will say, oh yeah, we can get good money for him, but he'll be easily replaceable. He's been there, 90 minutes week in, week out, barely missed a game for probably 4 seasons in a row. As soon as he gets taken out of the team, I'm really fearful. No matter how we look to set up, I think we'll realise how important he is when he's gone. It'll be a sad day when he is gone. But
I also feel like I know I'm speaking as the only person who's seen Luke Connell, but I reckon if you could get 10 million for Matt Grimes and then spend 2 million on Luke Connell, who I think could be just as good, then you've got a spare £8 million, which is where I think might end up working in your favour. That's just sort of speculation. But in terms of the number 6 role, actually, Luke, is there a world in which Liam Walsh could potentially step up and cover for Grimes, or come in if required?
I think Walsh is very talented, to be honest. From what I saw at the back end of last season, he's very, very good on the ball. He's got a very good eye on him for passing it around and vision. So he could replace Matt Grimes, maybe. I'm just a little bit concerned that he can't because of his injury record. So you just touched on Matt Grimes, ever present. I think he missed maybe 1 game last season in the league. Since we come to the Championship, he started under Graham Potter as left back, but by mid-season he was undroppable centre midfield, which obviously Potter didn't see him as that in the start of the season, but then he forced his way in there, became captain under Steve Cooper, and has literally had the team built around him ever since. So very difficult to replace. I want to see Liam Walsh do well. I've just seen him get injured so much that I would be worried if we are relying on him to do Grimes' job, because when he isn't there, when he is injured, I'm not sure where we go.
Yeah, that makes sense. When Liam Walsh had probably the best form of his career at Coventry City, by the way, it was in a 3-4-2-1, where he had a more tenacious midfielder alongside him in Liam Kelly, who just did more of the destructive work. Whereas I think if Walsh was a single pivot, especially at Championship level, I think there's probably more of an element of risk with that. Whereas I think with Matt Grimes, he's a 7 out of 10 every week for 7+ out of 10 every week for 4 years, and I don't think we can underestimate how hard that's going to be to replace if he were to go. Hopefully he'll stay, of course. Which brings me, Ben, on to the question for the more positive question on Swansea City, which I'm going to give to you. What would be the reason for me to be really hopeful about Swansea City's chances this season and say yes, they could really push for the playoffs?
I think we're going to be a lot more intelligent with how we recruit. I think last 2 seasons under Russell Martin, we did have a manager who could have got us promoted, but he had his hands tied behind his back for the majority of his spell. I think we have alignment in how we want to approach, how we recruit on the field between the manager, between the head of operations that we've got in place now. And I think I probably want to echo what Michael Duff said. Last season, we probably had possession's sake at times, and the Swansea way, everyone thinks the Swansea way and possession go hand in hand, but I think one core principle of the Swansea way, when it first came about, was one-touch passing. It was a lot quicker on the floor. I'm not expecting Michael Duff to be playing one-touch football, but I think speed is the one word that's emanating a lot throughout the summer this year now, how we're looking to recruit Janelli and Key, both quick, and we've said publicly we're looking to recruit pace to make us well, probably more suited to how we want to approach our style of play this season. So
Yeah.
pace of how we take ourselves on in one-on-one duels, but also then pace on the ball, wanting to have possession but not pass around the back, waiting for the team to we're playing against a full back into defensive shape. We want to move quick and exploit the gaps that they're leaving for us. So I think now that there's a clear plan in how we want to recruit and how that's going to look on the field, hopefully that'll lead to results.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth noting as well, in Duff's first season at Cheltenham, he signed this veteran centre-forward called Luke Varney. You may be familiar with, he's been around the leagues a bit. And he was sort of a real kind of focal point, and they weren't afraid sometimes to go early to Luke Varney, as well as playing some good football. And then his Barnsley side last season were very good at sort of playing through the left initially and using that left-sided combination. And then all of a sudden they'd play it into Luke O'Connell, and then they'd switch it over, and they had a very athletic right wing back and a right-sided midfielder that made some runs into goal-scoring areas, or they would interchange, and they'd sort of be able to transition quickly after the opposition pressed them. And I think that could be a really effective thing that's maybe a little bit different to what Swansea have had. So encouraging from that point of view. Luke, what will be the reason for me to be actually a little bit more cautious about Swansea this season and say, if things go badly, if they lose 1-2 key players, they could drop into the bottom half?
See how much truth it is in how many players Russell Martin wants to take off us, I guess. I mean, at the moment, it seems quite calm. If he does come in for Grimes, and there's been other players linked, the two centre-backs, Wood and Cabango. Now, I know that's easy newspaper links, but I think everyone's expecting somebody to follow him, Southampton. And then it's how well you replace those players. Now, Perot, we're expecting to leave, so say he's gone already. Manning is already a really tough one to replace, and the wing-back areas are not well stacked for us. And if Grimes does go, that's just three key players from our team last season that I would say, well, Grimes and Manning for me were two of the players of the year. For me, it was one of those two. So if they did both go in this window, as well as a top goal scorer, very, very difficult transition season ahead. So that's what I'd be concerned. But obviously, it depends how well you adapt and how well these new infrastructure things behind the scene in the club help out when it comes to the recruitment, to see how much impact that can make. But obviously, to avoid the relegation battle, it needs to be a quick impact as well in the transitions. So that's where the worries, I think, could come in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you lose Wood, Manning, Grimes and Perot, I think it would make it a transitional season. But I felt like it'd be a season of transition for Barnsley last season. And very quickly, Michael Duff implemented the working culture he wanted, clear patterns of play, and some excellent performances within a few months. So I rate this a manager I rate incredibly highly, and I hope that's something Swansea fans are really excited about seeing. Gents, such a pleasure to chat about the Swans with you this evening. Thank you so much for your time. Luke, what are your plans for the SwansCast pod next season?
We're drawing up some ways maybe we can make it fresh, if you like. So I want to try and continue to do some pre-match work with other podcasts from other clubs. That worked quite well last year. I just wasn't able to consistently do a week in, week out. So that's a goal. And yeah, see where it goes from there, really. It's obviously difficult around your work in life, but always happy for new ideas. And I just want to keep it fresh, really, and see where we can go. So
absolutely. Yeah, well, I know you're doing a great job with that, so keep it up, mate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers. Ben, also, what you got planned for the Jack Army account for next season?
My plan's probably to ask Luke nicely to come on the SwansCast, I guess.
I was literally going to say you're always welcome to come on. I don't know why we haven't sorted that out sooner, really, because that's another thing I want to do this year is get more guests on. So yeah, you're always welcome. We'll have to have a chat and sort it out.
Well, there we are, sorted.
Lovely stuff. Thanks to you for watching at home. Thanks to my guest Luke from SwansCast and Ben from the Jack Army. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Swansea City Summer Deep Dive, and we'll see you again very soon.